Good evening. How's everybody? We're ready to go. I like that.
Yes, sir. Ready.
That makes me happy. Let me get something to drink here. Lordy. Hopefully, hopefully tonight won't be too long. Sure, things get back. All right.
We promise to keep it short. We promise to keep it short.
Good.
Short and to the point.
I'll do the same. All right. I see the time just rolled over. I'm gonna go ahead and get started then. Thank you. This is MELS 603. Appreciate you being with me. All right, here's the good stuff I saw this week from Kristen. She talked about the importance of using an interview team. I like that. But I would caution you, you're gonna be the one responsible for who gets hired as principal. So, grain of salt there. While the interview team can add depth and perspective to that, but you understand that if you got reservations, it's going to come down to you. Letitia talked about intervention protocol for K2 students, which I really like because we don't talk about that, what we need to do at that level. So if you want to look at a good K2 early intervention protocol, Letitia had one. Tommy had a good one. His had an excellent protocol on his. His is more secondary, and Jeffrey. Letitia had a good example of IEP collaboration in decision making. Excellent summary of the hiring process. Letitia had a good one on that one as well. Wanda, I liked her hiring in that she had the exact step and pointed out for the principal to follow, and pointed out that can't vary, and you have to document every one of the steps. And remember, the same 9 steps that's the substance of due process. Substantive. The procedural it varies from district to district in terms of who carries out those 9 steps. And what I liked about what Wanda's response to hiring was, she said, this is the principal's response. These are the ones of those steps the principal has to do. That doesn't vary. Always got to be the same thing, and you have to document. That's excellent for procedural due process. Josh, I loved what Josh summarized for cyberbullying. Focus on the threat, not the means or the way the threat was made. Now, full disclosure, I don't like EDCI people. That's the Doctor of Education and Curriculum Instruction. I'm not a big fan of theirs, but also I've been married to one for 39 years. So, and I love her better than my next breath. So go figure. That's a contradiction even for me. But what they will tell you is all of education is content and process. What is the substance, and then how are we going to convey it? The conveyance. Josh's point is great in that focus on the content, not the process of how they got it or what they used or any of that. See, that's just trying to find excuses not to do anything. When you start focusing on the process and not the content, that's how you go down the wrong path. So that's a great point. I really like that. Content and process, it's in everything in education. Kristen talked about, she talked with her HR about benefits, employee assistance, but she also talked about the Family Medical Leave Act. There's been some changes to that you need to kind of keep up to date with. Again, on employee assistance, nobody is asking you in benefits to be the expert. But teachers will come to you. They expect you to know something. It doesn't need to be that some village is missing their idiot. When they ask you some questions, you should be able to answer general stuff, but tell them who they can talk with, because this is very personal to them. It's very important. Those kinds of things. Kristen made a good point. It's a risk delegating building safety. delegating this to your custodian or that. I wouldn't do it. No, you're, it's just like discipline. You're responsible for it. LaShonda made the point that she felt like there's more bullying in middle and high school. Wonder why? I don't know. Because they're social media junkies, probably would be my guess. Glenda made the point that South Carolina needs to move on cyberbullying, but now understand South Carolina doesn't, they have general bullying laws. They don't have a lot of stuff on cyberbullying, but also understand that South Carolina is one of two states of the 50 in the United States that doesn't have a hate crime law. And I suspect that they're afraid if they start the cyberbullying that might illuminate the fact that they allow hate speech and don't seem to do anything about it. But you better deal with it. I like that Brandon provided the Guilford County report form for bullying. That was good job, Brandon. They've got a form. He showed that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you got to know. Teachers got to know where that kind of stuff is. Randy did a good job on his skip task 1. His long term was a little bit different. And I like what he had him come in and do. He had him come in and basically their long-term goal will be to have parents come in and help build a summer resource kit for kids, for students. That's a great back balance to try to lessen that summer decline that you get when, it's like when they show back up in the fall, it's like their first day in school, no matter what grade they're in. That summer resource kit could help with that. That's a really good long term. Remember, the short term goal in the skip is how we're going to grab them, how we're going to communicate with them. Then we need to have a worthy activity for them to come to school and be involved in. Putting together a summer resource kit would be a worthy activity. I like that one a lot. Larry made the point, and you got to make teachers understand when they write the written referral, that's how it starts the due process. But that's the end of that's the end of their input into the process. It's illegal to let them determine, the consequence as well. That violates due process, and you have to get teachers to understand that you're not just trying to be ugly to them, and that you do value their opinion, but you can't let them give you your opinion because that would violate the law. If somebody overhears you. And I told you, Dr. Sain's in a lawsuit right now, who normally helps me with this course, but he's in a lawsuit because 2 teachers were having a conversation and a third heard them and reported it. So it happens. So, you tell, love, you mean it, but you can't tell me what you think I'll do to this kid. That is not, that could get us both in trouble. Caroline pointed out that fundraising is responsibility of the principal. And it is, and you got to get it approved, and it's terrible. I mean, the only good fundraising is no fundraising. Sean did a very thorough job on bullying with the law. Wanda did a great job on employee assistance, and made the point. You got to be able to explain it to teachers. They want to hear it from you. I mean, yeah, there's somebody over at the central office, but they work for you every day. You got to be able to explain. That's very important. And Tommy will conclude with this because we need to get started. When a teacher is hired after the first, I put 20 days, I think it's 10, but it can't be more than 20. When a teacher is hired after the first 20 days, federal law says they can't be on a permanent contract. They're temporary. They're on an end of the year contract. They have to go back in the pool and reapply for their job. And teachers get upset about that. That doesn't mean we don't love you, don't want you, that you're not doing a great job. But Equal Opportunity Employment Commission says that you can't manipulate the law by waiting a few days and then hiring somebody and then not advertising the job as a way to get somebody in who might be less qualified or related to somebody. So if they're hired, the rule of thumb in CMS was 10 days. But I know that it can't be more than 20. Most districts work on the 10-day report. After the first 10 days of school, if you're hired, even if it's a full-time position, it's end of year. Your contract cannot be continued. And you have to go through the hiring process, just like, and the job has to be re-advertised. That is not being hateful. It's not being mean. It's just to keep people from using that, waiting a few days, hiring their friends kind of thing that might not be qualified. To make sure that everybody gets due process in the hiring. That's what that's about, end of year contracts. All right. Who's first team tonight? Gonna tell us about Leandro and funding and why you can't move the money around. Josh's group's going, go, wide open.
Okay, go out there. Go out there, Chris. No. I gotta do this. Okay.
Oh, 1 second. Let me mute everybody, and then you can unmute yourself. All right, Josh, y'all can unmute yourself as you need to go.
All right, sounds great. Kizzy, you ready to get started?
Yes, I'm sorry. Oh God, I'm sorry. Excuse my background. I have a 3-year-old. All right, so we're doing case study number 2. My name is Kizzy Stevenson. We have Tamala Jones, Melody Williams, and Joshua Powell.
All right, if you'll leave that slide up just 1 second, I'm sorry. I got you. Go right ahead.
Okay, so we're going to just basically go over the case review. So the Leandro versus the state of North Carolina in 1994, a lawsuit was filed against the state of North Carolina by the parents, children in the school district, and 5 low-wealth rural communities. The plaintiff argued that despite the higher than average taxes rates, schools in those counties ended up with lower than average tax revenues. The North Carolina Supreme Court held that all the children residing in North Carolina have a fundamental state constitutional right to the opportunity to receive a sound and basic education. Basically, the funds that was going, they were paying higher taxes, but the money wasn't going to that school. So they were upset about that.
Well, they weren't getting enough money.
Mm-hmm.
Money was going, there just wasn't enough of it. That's kind of like it. That's kind of like me week before payday. There's money coming in, there's just not enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, it goes back to taxes for schools are from business tax and property taxes from residential. Well, if the houses aren't worth a lot, or if there aren't any business, you could have a high rate, but still have a low yield in terms of how much money you bring in. So what they said to the state is because we don't have the ability to get more money, we need for you to regulate how much you give to start with, rather than giving everybody 7. We want you to give the rich places 5 and us 9. They add their 4 to it, and we all end up with 9. What they were wanting was to get away from flat grant funding, where everybody gets exactly the same, and make it dependent upon the local wealth in terms of how much money the state was giving. That's the whole notion here is, we want to change the formula. But as we found out, the Supreme Court said everybody gets a sound basic education. We're giving you enough money to do that you can't add any in to that. Not our problem. We'll give you enough to get the sound basic, which is the 7,000 back then. That some people are getting more than that. You have no constitutional right to more than that. You only have the constitutional right to the sound basic education, which is $7,000. So we're not going to give you 9. That's how that works. All right, please continue.
All right, we can go to the next slide, Josh.
Kizzy, that's still you.
Okay. So the Kingman-Beaufort County Board of Education, the Supreme Court relied on this to find that students who are suspended have the right to alternative education unless the district can articulate a substantial reason why it cannot provide alternative education. That's just something else that was also related to like the case study that was on like the additional document that we discussed, that we looked back at when we was looking at the different court cases.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to review the superintendent's plan, and what he, had stated in the letter to the community. So his plan was that he was going to use a student-based budgeting format, which allocates money directly to schools based on the number of students enrolled and the specific needs of those students, with the goal of ensuring a more equitable allocation of money. The superintendent enthusiastically notifies the stakeholders that this program will be implemented after receiving feedback from principals and conducting a pilot program at the 4 schools. The goal is to guarantee a more equal distribution of funds, and he is
Use the word
deciding.
equitable, not equal. The whole idea is it won't be equal. It will be
Right.
equitable.
Equitable, yes. Distribution of funds, and he is deciding that the district's funding by giving the students' needs top priority, and he's trying to decide.
Yeah. So what he's saying is on the we'll use Chapel Hill, Carborough. We used them last week as an example. We'll give the Chapel Hill side less money than we give the Carborough side, because that would be equitable, because they have less on that side and they have more at-risk learners, and it's Title I and all those things that we know that it takes more help and support, which means money to address their needs. And so we have to make sure that we understand his plan was an equity plan where we give some people more than others. Equal would be everybody gets the same. The money already comes everybody the same. He wanted to make it, divvy it up where we're giving more to some and less to others based on how hard it is to educate them, the specific needs of those students. That was his plan. But again, going back to Leandro, that's exactly what the state said that they wouldn't do, and banned local districts from doing it as well. And that's why the lady in Chapel Hill got in trouble, because she was giving more to the Carborough side than the Chapel Hill side.
And then the pros and cons, we looked at those for the student-based budgeting, and the pros were to provide schools with underprivileged children with greater resources. The student-based budgeting allocated money directly to schools based on the number of students enrolled and the specific needs of those students, and the money would follow the student. The cons were that, as we have in bold, it's in direct violation of North Carolina state law. Local counties are not involved in deciding how to distribute the federal or state funding. Could grant the principal complete discretion over the use of monies and potentially resulting in dispositions over many counties. The budget will become highly unstable and unpredictable, which could result in losing teachers. Tracking funds may be difficult if the pilot program were to expand, and funding from taxpayers would go to other schools depending on certain student needs.
I want to focus on the first bullet down. The budget will become highly unstable and unpredictable, which could result in losing teachers. All right, think about this right now. We're going to continue to use Chapel Hill, Carborough. Remember, Chapel Hill is the haves and Carborough is the have-nots. We're going to continue to use that. All right, we shift a bunch of money from the Chapel Hill side to the Carborough side. All right, that's what we're going to do. And so all of a sudden, sure enough, we won't have as many teachers over here on the Chapel Hill side as we have on, so we'll move them over there. What if they won't go? What if they'll go to another district where they can teach at the more affluent schools? Do you think that might drive your teachers out? Absolutely, it will.
Yes.
I'll give you a personal example. I told you I've been married to one of them EDCI ladies for 39 years. Well, she taught school and did curriculum instruction in Charlotte Mecklenburg. The reason she taught school, she taught at a lab IB school at Davidson College. The best and the brightest 240 kids you've ever seen. Well, they decided, they being the school board in Mecklenburg County, decided that they were going to close that site. The building was old, needed a lot of work, and they were going to move it to one of the other middle school sites. They were going to move it off of the campus there and move it elsewhere. And they were going to move it down at one of the lower Welch schools and try to bring some bright kids and better teachers down there. My wife said no. She just retired. She just said, no, I'm not going down there. It wasn't that far away, 10 miles, 9 or 10 miles. It wasn't like it was a million miles away, but no, I'm not doing your social experiment. This was a lab school, IB International Baccalaureate, designed at this. If you move it away from there, it loses its integrity. We'll have to take whoever comes along. This was not about that. This was a particular thing. But, and so I can tell you right now, if you did this and you moved the money from Chapel Hill side to the Carborough side, the teachers would not go with it. I hate to say that. I hate to be that pejorative, and I hate to talk about how be ugly about teachers. Y'all think I hate them already. I don't. But I'm just telling you, they will not go with you. That's another thing. And so you say, well, Dale, why are you harping on? You got to be careful, not only about bigger than this case about moving the money around. You got to understand, teachers, if you change things from what they expected or what they were hired for them, you'll lose them now. They'll just up and quit. They'll go. You got to be real careful about making these kinds of snap decisions. Oh, we'll just move her over there teaching this in that building. It'll be fine. Or him. No, it won't. It won't be fine. Times have changed. The shoe's on the other foot. And so that's a great point, number 4 there on your list. You'll lose teachers if you were to try this. I mean, even though it might be a wonderful idea, if you tried this, you'd lose teachers, and not just a few. You'd lose a lot. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
Okay, then we got into the ethical paradigms as it relates to the case. We'll start with justice, but I want to say this. He followed the ethical paradigms, but the law was not followed when it comes to justice.
Yeah, that's why we apply both of these standards. Sometimes things are legal, but they're just not ethical. Sometimes things are ethical, they're just not legal. And that's why you have to apply both standards.
Right. While trying to provide equity, he broke the law.
Mm-hmm.
And under justice, by using priority-based budgeting and allocating monies in accordance with the needs to support students, the superintendent is working toward equity. The law does not support this. Then I went into care. Because the superintendent devised a particular system for allocating funds and include the principals in the process, the students-based budgeting is not arbitrary or capricious. Before creating this program, he paid attention to the concerns of the principals. Critique the fact that a high proportion of minority or poor students may be in the at-risk group of students may lead some individuals to disagree with the student-based budgeting, since it will appear that the budgeting system favors particular schools with the high percentages of students from certain social classes. My takeaway is that schools that lose money will more than likely lose teachers who are paid by the state. Profession. It is evident from the students-based budgeting that the superintendent is accountable for the academic progress of the students.
Okay.
And that's it.
Let's revisit care. Similar to the bullet 4 on teachers. Do you think the principals are going to lose money and teachers are going to be happy? Do you think they might try to stir up every bit of trouble that they could in the world? Do you think they won't call their board member that serves their district, that they won't call everybody that's got a telephone and stir up every bit of stink that they could stir up in the world? Have teachers calling organized parents into a phone tree. I've seen it. I've seen this. Now you say, well, Dale, this is illegal. How could you? Charlotte Mecklenburg has pupil assignment, and it's completely political in terms of where they draw the attendance line, and they change every 2 years. And you can get your ox gored on pupil assignment. You can lose big time, or you can win big time. I mean, it makes or breaks you. Remember, in proficiency, who you got is what matters, not what you do with them. Gross about what you do with them. And so it's a battle royal every 2 years on pupil assignment. One of our students right now in the traditional 5-semester program, his dad was the pupil assignment wizard when I was in Charlotte Meck, and he had to leave because people hated him. He got death threats. I'm serious. It was executive director of pupil assignment. People wanted to kill him. But principals will stir up more trouble than you could deal. If you tell them that they're going to lose even $1 or one teacher, oh my Lord. And so just remember that too. When you start trying to say, I'm going to give one group more than the other, not only do you have to deal with parents, angry teachers, teachers resigning, but principals that stir up every bit of political trouble that they're able to, they will do it. And the dumbest thing I ever heard a superintendent say was to the high school principal group, which I was a part of. He was speaking most directly to the principal at East Meck, who was stirring up trouble over pupil assignment. A principal, a superintendent can save a principal, but a principal can't save a superintendent. So you need to, basically telling him, stop. And I thought, you're the idiot. The principal of East Meck is a whole lot more popular than you will ever be, and he's from here. You're just some carpetbagger from Virginia. I don't believe I'd be threatening him too much. And it turned out that turned out to be true. Ron won in the end on that one easily. It was a knockout. They didn't even have to count. So understanding that if you get on the wrong side of the political equation on something like this, it will not go well for you. And so, even though it might be the right thing to do legally, it's going to be a tough sell, and ethically on some of the other ethical paradigms, it's going to be a tough sell as well. All right, continue on. I'm sorry.
All right, just to wrap it up and give our final thoughts about this whole deal. The superintendent's plan should not be approved by the school board, obviously. Even though the idea to create equity between schools seems to be motivated from a good place, it is still illegal, according to Leandro. Federal, state, and local funds cannot be diverted to other schools or other programming within the schools either. And then the last one in bold: follow the law, keep your job and your house.
That's sound advice.
If not, it will not go well for you, right?
Exactly. If you don't, it will not go well for you. It will go bad. But yes, I like your last bullet there. Federal, state, local funds cannot be diverted to other schools or other programming within the same school. You got to know that. And that stuff is so easy to track, folks. And if the money's not there, if it's gone, if it's spent somewhere else, and so, you can stop your share now. I want to speak specifically to one of your monthly reports. You have two main monthly reports that come directly out of Power School. You have 1,000 other things, but there are two that you better not get wrong. First one is PPAR, the activity report, attendance. Got to get that one right, because remember, how do you get paid? From attendance, and they subtract the absenteeism. But the other one that you get caught on when you start trying to move stuff around and manipulate is the school activity report, the SAR. Now, the school activity report is your master schedule translated into Power School. You have to enter it in, and it's what teachers teaching what, how many kids are in the room, all that kind of stuff is your school activity report. Now, one of the things that principals like to do is we'll say that there's 25 in this room and 25, but what we'll actually do is we'll put 29 in that one, and we'll just put 20 in that one, because they're a little bit hard. But we don't want that to show up on our report, or we'll go a few over no. When somebody comes out and audits your building, and they will, everybody better be where they're supposed to be with the teachers that you say that they're with, and the teachers better be teaching the courses you say that they're teaching. That's how that better be. Otherwise it will not go well for you. And that is checked on, by the way, that is checked on a monthly basis that your SAR is correct. That Everybody's where it's supposed. So you can't be taking and giving extra help over here. You say, well, that's not really money. Well, if you're paying those people salary, that's moving money. We're going to give them a little extra help over here, but now we're not going to tell anybody because people might get mad about that, or if they find out, or they're not supposed to do that. Well, don't. If you're not supposed to, then don't do it. Just don't. Well, but those folks, I know they need help. Now, I'll use myself as the bad example. I'm pretty good at that. You notice that I don't have a coach this semester. I gave my coach to the collapse beginning classes. They're a whole lot harder to deal with than y'all are. Y'all are a breeze. I just split y'all into 2 nights. I ain't got anything else to do. I'm old. And off we go. We have a great time. I'd love to have somebody with us, especially a sitting principal, but we took 4 classes and collapsed them into 2 because of cost and money, and they're overloaded with beginners. And you know how lost y'all were the first month or 2. And so now I can do that, and I'm not harming anybody else because I'm doing it to myself. I'm willing to do that. Now, I wouldn't do that to somebody else that I was employing. That would not go well for me if I did that, but I can do it to myself. And so it's one of these do as I say, not as I do kind of things. Yes, I'm doing that right now, but that's allowable in my business in a private college. As long as if I take the hit myself, I'm good. It's not allowable in a public institution to do that. I couldn't assign a teacher assistant to somebody else if they were supposed to be in that room. And that's basically what I've done. And so that gives you, shows you that. Excellent job. You got it right. Liz, you have a question?
No, our team wants to go next. We're ready.
What you waiting on? You're backing up. You're waiting on me.
Here we go. This is Team 6. I'm Liz Schreiber, MTSS coach at a primary school in Cabarrus County.
I'm Jasmine. I'm in Elizabeth City. I'm a speech facilitator at the moment and subbing for ECPPS Public Schools, but I'm K6.
And I am Quintina McKnight, and I'm in King Street, South Carolina.
All right. So I started with some of the takeaways from our chapter 2. It had a lot of good information in there. It went over exactly what our budget is for our districts. It talked about legal compliance and fiscal stewardship, and the different revenue sources as to how the budget is funded, local flow through state and federal funds. Moving on.
For those of you who don't know, flow through is like grants. It just comes through you and goes straight out.
Another thing that I thought was important from chapter 2 was a systems approach model in terms of the steps it takes to get from planning the budget to actual funds to your school. You need to identify your fiscal policies and instructional goals, develop your decision-making calendar, which each district should have a budget calendar. They look at enrollment for the allocation of funds for facilities, and that gets approved. Projections for revenue and guidelines. Then you get your site-based resource allocations and approval. You pull together that budget, you make a first draft. It's presented, revised, presented to your school board, and adopted. You should have some input from your community, taxpayers, parents as well. The advantages to this model is it fosters order but not control, promotes inclusion, not exclusion. It promotes reliance on teamwork of professionals, partnerships between school business manager and other professionals, and it keeps your standards high if you use this model from our chapter 2. Moving on.
Excellent.
Types of budgeting that stood out. There's a lot of different types. Line item budgeting, which is more the traditional, zero-based budgeting, priority-based budgeting, site-based, school-based budgeting, which from our case study is also student-based budgeting. I did want to ask, because they said it.
It's the same. Yeah.
Okay.
and then outcome-based budgeting. I'll come back to priority-based, but SBB was what is being focused on tonight.
All right, I am going to share a summary of the Leandro versus the state of North Carolina. In summary, in 1994, the districts, there were 5 districts along with their families, I think it was primarily 5 rural districts, filed lawsuit regarding the inadequate funding to provide equal education. So the Supreme Court ruled 2 times in 1997 and 2004 that North Carolina has the constitutional right to provide sound and basic education, including well-trained teachers and principals, as well as equitable access to resources. The
Let's stop
Wested
right there. Now, we go back to the deep law, but they also said, yeah, you get these things, but we're not going to change the funding formula. You have no right to equal funding at the end. We're going to give you equal to start with. What you do after that, not our business. And you cannot manipulate it. The state is the only one that can do that. And so we got to be clear that there should be another bullet there that says, what did the original case study, the finding in 1997, what did they find? Again, the plaintiffs wanted the funding formula changed because they said we're getting inadequate funding. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to change the formula. You have a right to these things, and the state's going to give you some extra money for that, but we're not going to change the formula because you have no right to equal at the end. You only have, we'll start with enough for a basic education, and after that, we have no right to make it equal in the end. So that's very important, in that if they didn't change the funding formula, but they said the state's going to give you money. Well, how are they going to give you money if they didn't change the formula? So what have we found? And so that 785 is now well over $1 billion, by the way, the last estimation. So that's the irony of the Leandro case. They said, we're not going to change the funding formula, but you're going to get more money. If you didn't change the formula, how would it be that you would get more money? Well, they said, we'll do the lottery. That's how well, that's no money. And so in the end, all that really matters is the plaintiffs lost. The promise of the money never materialized, as we knew it wouldn't at the time, but unless you change the formula of how you allotted money, how do you expect money to differentiate then? And so that's why I loved your first slide there, Jasmine, in that how budgeting works. If you don't change the budgeting process, how do you expect the dollars to change in the end? And so everybody in 97, myself included, because remember, I was on the Leandro, I was on the legal team. We knew that if you lost, nothing was going to change. The lottery is just a regressive tax. There's no money that comes to schools from lotteries. Nowhere in the world. And so, unfortunately, and so, yes, you're right, Liz, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Wested said, there was no plan. If you didn't change the funding formula, Wested said, well, how did you think you were going to get money? There's no plan for you to get money. They said you were going to get money, but there's no vehicle. There's no way for that to happen. And so I'll let you pick back up, Liz. You do a better job than me.
So when I was reading the Wested Consulting Group plan, I was like, gosh, this sounds like such a good plan, but none of this is happening.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later when I saw the 2022 North Carolina Supreme Court upheld the ruling. However, they could not hold the legislative and executive branch accountable for what the judicial branch had decided. And it felt like our checks and balances system was failing us in education because what the judicial branch had decided was fair and owed to the state or to the districts was not being upheld from the other branches. And hence why we're in the situation we are today with underfunded schools and districts not having the money they need. And sadly, the state of education for many schools and students.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, now I'll take up for the executive branch. You know, the General Assembly in North Carolina has a super majority, and he's not of that party, and so he has the same amount of authority in budget matters that I do. So now he has advocated, he has sent budgets, he's done everything, and they just simply veto it. And if he vetoes their budget, they just override it. But I'm telling you, the leaders of the General Assembly from the Republican Party have stood in the well of the Senate and said, we're not giving you any money. You can't make us 90-90 boo-boo. I mean, they're saying the quiet part out loud now. They used to come up with excuses and talk around it and change. They don't do that anymore. They simply say, you can't force us. We have funding authority and you can't make us do anything. And we have a super majority. We can override any veto or anything else that we want to do. And so they have become, because of that super majority in the General Assembly, there is no checks and balances in North Carolina, as Liz just said. There is one, and that is it. That is the judicial. The judicial can do whatever they want to, and the executive, but the legislative holds all the power in North Carolina. And as long as they say we're not going to, there's no way to make them do that. The only way that this could ever happen is the federal government would have to step in.
It feels a little bit like I'm managing a recess disagreement at my primary school between 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
And the big bully is the one who has the power, and the
Yep.
other 2 know what's right and what's needed and won't
again,
work together.
Exactly. The bully just says, no, I don't have to listen to reason. I can get people to vote for me against their own interests.
And there's no consequences for my actual behavior.
Exactly. Because, that we'll continue to rile them up and scare them. All them old people, we'll scare them that, they're coming to get your stuff. And replacement theory, we're going to replace you with other people. I mean, all that's scare tactics. And it's amazing to me, but that's what they've done to the point where they've gotten a super majority.
Right. Just mentioned a couple of social issues.
Yeah.
And everybody forgets everything.
Yep, exactly. Stuff that's, they're taking our jobs. I don't want to hang sheetrock, by the way. I don't know about y'all. They're not taking any jobs that I want. Need people to do that work. They're a lot better and faster and work a lot better than I do, but I don't know anybody lining up to get them manual labor jobs that somebody's taking. And by the way, immigration's been a net zero for the last 15 years. They're not coming over the wall in droves. And I've been out west too, by the way. It's impossible to build a wall that you could keep people out. If you've seen the terrain out there, oh my God. It would be a bigger task than building the Great Wall of China to build a wall that people couldn't get over out there. It's crazy, but that's what I'm talking about. We've gotten into this stuff, and we're in a situation now where we can't get the resources to the kids that need the resources in our schools. And if you try, they'll crucify you like they did the lady in Chapel Hill, Carborough, if you try. I'm surprised she stayed out of jail, quite honestly. I really am. All righty.
So Dr. Lamb, your comments about different schools and districts having different needs, it was interesting because among our team of 6 with Jasmine and Quintina and myself, we are all from very different districts with different needs. And before class tonight, we were FaceTiming and talking about, well, what does your school have and what are your school's needs and how big is your district? And gosh, it really does come down to money and the amount of money that your local district can pour into to supplement what the state supplies. And I was like, gosh, that really hit home tonight to hear from my colleagues when we were discussing this case study and how it's not necessarily equal or even equitable.
Yeah. The state only gives you enough money to keep you alive. They won't fatten you up at all. They just give you enough money. If you want to thrive, you got to have local money. That's the way that's just it. The state will just gives you barely enough to keep you alive. Bread and water. That's all you get from them. It's that local money, and if you don't have it, it just won't happen. See, there's two fallacies in education. One is that it takes money to educate kids, and the other one is that it's not money. That the answer is not always money. Yes, it is. It is always money. Now, do people waste money and not get results that spend it? Yes, that happens sometimes, but nobody ever did great things on a shoestring on nothing. That never happened. Never. You cannot be a premier school district if all you got is state money. You can only hope to be adequate. You can only hope not to be harming children. You're not going to provide them with what they need in any stretch of the imagination on what little bit the state gives you.
And that's a great segue into our case study summary.
There you go.
Where we looked at this superintendent that was trying to do some equity funding using the pilot program called student-based budgeting. And the superintendent wanted to direct money to schools based on the number of students enrolled and the specific needs of those students. And the case study was pretty vague regarding what those needs were. So it was going to use predetermined weighting based on the student needs, grade levels, at-risk learners, and then putting money behind the stated goals that those principals and administrators had determined for those schools to empower the leaders to use that money towards what the school needed. It also referenced including some parental involvement and saying that their input and their participation was encouraged, and that it was an effort to be transparent with their budgeting decisions. Unfortunately, the case study description was still pretty vague about what the principal was using in terms of data to decide how that money was going to be used. I'll turn it over to Quintina.
I think you're muted.
John, the superintendent, was his decision legal or not appropriate? In the case study, of course, certain students' needs, such as the grade levels or at-risk learners, were given a predetermined weight that translate to real dollar amount. Of course, that was not appropriate. How is it weighted? Who determines the weight and the formula? Funding is determined on enrollment and is allocated monthly. What would this look like with the weight formula? So we know that wasn't appropriate. And there was no overall goals to address students' achievement. And then the formula did little to address students in the school diverse need. The perceived benefits of the SBB, our text states that the allocation system may also include some types of weighing system for students with special needs. So it is not unheard of to use the budgeting approach. State that use weighing do so to provide additional funding to special populations such as special education, English language learners, or at risk, or to recognize the additional cost of certain grade levels such as high school. It also gives authority to principals to allocate funds based on the student needs or the school goals. So is that true?
Is it true?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm not hearing you saying too much.
I mean, there were 37 states that did this, and that's exactly what they did. Now, since the inauguration in 2017 and the packing of the courts with appointees from that presidential administration, now there's only 27 that do that. 10 red states got out of this business because their base doesn't like that idea. What we were just talking about a minute ago. But yes, there are now 27. There were 37 as little as 7 years ago. There were 37 states that did some form of funding like this, student based or site based, where they gave more money to harder populations and less to the wealthier kids. That number has dropped by 10 across the nation because we got the old white people like me riled up out in the front yard, screaming, yelling at the clouds. That they got people like me thinking that that was the end of Western civilization to give poor kids a little bit more. And so, but yes, there's still 27 that do it, thank goodness. But at one time I thought we'd get all 50 states, and we got all the way to 37, and now we've regressed. But we've regressed on a lot of social issues over the last 7 years as well. But yeah, it does do that. That is correct.
And that's including the flat grant funding.
Mm-hmm.
With the wealth of the communities and the various needs of students or regional cost difference, the SBB attempts to address the needs of students.
Right. Yeah. It's inherently unfair. If you give the same amount, whether they have a lot or have a little, it's inherently unfair. Again, I don't like the notion of it's inherently inequitable. Fair is an early adolescent concept. As you get older, you realize that the only affair for adult, as I told you, is a place to go in the fall of the year to get a corn dog and ride the Ferris wheel. There is no fair. It's equitable or inequitable. All right.
We're here right at the end. So we looked at the perceived benefits, and so we understand that there are some. You just summarized for us that there's still some states that are managing
27.
And so what I looked at also from the text to summarize, kind of to end us up, but you've got an equalization method that kind of is like a catch-all that takes into account taxation, wealth, and local needs of districts, which is what it sounds like we should be trying to do.
Yeah.
What the concept should look like. Broke that down into percentage equalizing and power equalizing. Your percentage equalizing, equal access to control. Local has more control. The state provides the revenue, but each district is based off the district's wealth. And then there's an average wealth of districts in the state. So that's where you were talking about the formula needed to be adjusted. And that's not what's happening. And that power equalizing as the
district power equalizing with a recapture provision is what is how you should be funding education. Always should have been that way. We got 37 states up to that, and now we're back down to 27.
And then to tie that in, it probably should look like priority-based budgeting, where you're designed to bring about a cultural change, but you're thinking about your priorities along with your budgeting. It's effective, it's efficient, results-oriented, and customer-focused. It brings the district spending into alignment with the district's policies and priorities, and it eliminates repetition of services, establishes economics of scale, creates parameters for downsizing state government. This is what it should look like. This is not what it looks like in North Carolina, but this is where I wanted to end up, because this is where the book really hit home with where it should be.
Yeah.
Pulled out for that.
Remembering that public education was for low wealth kids. That was the whole notion. That's why I said it should be this way, should have always been. Public education was never designed for rich folks. That they already had private schools.
Hello.
And we've gotten away from our core mission here, which is to educate the underprivileged. That's what public school is about. Always was. And so those of us who have pushed for years to try to get to district power equalizing got up to 37, and now we've made a reverse. We've lost 10 just in the last 7 years. North Carolina, as long as we have all the poor folks in either end of the state that will vote against their own interests, economic self-interest, because of their bigotry, we'll never have district power equalizing in North Carolina.
That's a quote.
unfortunately. But, those people can't get past their personal and political truth, most of their political truth. They have their party, and that's my tribe. I got to hang with them, ride or die, always. Even if it's against my own personal interests, I don't want to be aligned with them people over there.
Well, Dr. Lamb, that's one thing that happened with my district that I'm in currently. They misuse funding. They move funding around. I won't go in details about exactly what happened, but we are now in control by the state.
Yeah.
And once you get in control by the state, you don't know what policies to follow the state, and they still have the district policy or the school board policy, and everyone looking crazy like, which policies are you actually supposed to follow, the state or the school board? But you no longer have a school board because of the state being over the whole entire district.
Yeah, it won't go well for you if money gets shifted when it's illegal to do that. And so it goes all the way back, and that's a good point, all the way back to the school board. And then when you get into that people lose their job. But more importantly is it doesn't make things better when the state comes in. It makes it a whole lot worse for the kids, a whole lot worse. So you're not doing anybody any favors by trying to do something like this if it's against the law to do it. What I hate out of all this is that, again, as I keep being redundant, that we've lost 10 states have gone over to the dark side. And back to, race. Basically, flat grant funding is basically race-based funding. Is everybody gets the same regardless of what they need, and it keeps the bigots happy. So that we've had 10 more states, red states, return back to that, and that's a shame. All right, next team.
I think we're last.
All righty.
Brandon has the slide.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
Brandon's on the way. Brandon's
Can y'all
my
see
man from Greensboro.
Let's see.
Our other group is sick tonight. I think one's got flu and one's got COVID.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I was there just a
COVID
couple
has
weeks
made
ago.
a big outbreak in the
There we
Gardner
go.
Webb community because we're one of the poorest counties in the state and backwards. The home of Tim Moore. Yay. They don't think COVID's a real thing in Cleveland County, so it's just rampant.
Yeah.
Just rampant in low wealth counties like Cleveland, where they, they'll drink white liquor and get blinded, but afraid to take a shot. I go figure.
I don't know. All righty then. So this is case study number 2. It's Adrian Stokes King, Larry Richardson, and Brandon Reeves.
Right.
All right, so we did a review of the Leandro case like everyone else. As you know, those 5 poor counties are saying we need more money. Even though we're taxing the heck out of our citizens, we still don't have enough money to provide the basic education that students have a constitutional right to receive. But we also noticed that the urban school districts jumped up and said, well, we get more poor kids. Even though y'all got poor kids, we got poor kids, special ed kids, and ELL kids. So we just need to give money flat out to everybody, not just more money to the poor states, put us to poor counties. In reviewing and looking at the case, we determined that a lot of it is based on, as already mentioned, a lot of political stuff. And with the supermajority, it's not looking well. And as Dr. Lamb already said, the flat rate based education is racist funding. Pure and simple.
Yeah. And that's why some people vote for it. They like that. That's their tribe.
Right.
Right.
Used to,
And
when you
am I,
said something was racist or discriminatory or bigotry, people tried to distance themselves from it. Now they run to it like
Oh,
moths
yeah.
to a flame.
Mhm.
right.
It's a dog whistle for their core,
Mm-hmm.
their base.
Because it seems so simple, like, okay, like you said, the tax base is not there, so they're not gonna get the money
Right.
any other way. So that's like simple. Why would we not change that?
Because we don't want want to. We
Right.
don't want them to do better. Well, there's so many things that, you know, when y'all get through, I'm going to talk about possibly the biggest. I mean, this is one of those. This is one of those things that just on the surface make no sense at all.
Right.
But unless you understand it's just based on bigotry and hatred, then it makes perfect sense.
But doesn't it bleed over into, I know it's racist, but doesn't it also bleed over into economics too? Because some
Well, that's what I mean, and so I mean that's what I'm talking about. People are voting against their own self-interest.
right. Because
But
like in the corridor of shame,
yeah,
there's a lot
exactly.
of
I hadn't been to
for
South
white people in those
Yeah,
areas.
it's well, it's what I mean is the W.C. Cash wrote a book in the late 40s called The Mind of the South. He's buried, by the way, in the graveyard there in Shelby. He's from Shelby. I think he's buried in one there at Gardner Webb. But anyway, he's a famous author, W.C. Cash. Book's called The Mind of the South, and that's what he's talking about. We keep the poor whites riled up and racist and bigotry, not understanding that they're putting themselves in the same economic cases as the people of color.
Right.
How do you get them to do that? Well, you keep that flame stoked all the time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the corridor of shame. White people suffer just like people of color, but that's the whole notion is in order to keep them down, the white people have to stay down with them. And so we convince them that they should be bigots, they should be racist. And I'm like,
right.
Y'all are just two different sides of the same coin. How do y'all not see that? The only color that really matters in this equation is green, money.
Yes.
But they do not see that.
Right.
And I don't know that we'll ever. And Cash in the 40s said that that we needed to convince them, and that's 80 years ago, and we still can't. Nothing has changed in 80 years. So
you're right. So it just really boils down to hatred and bigotry. That's
we're playing to the base.
Yeah.
Keep them riled up, keep them scared. Replacement theory. We're going to replace white people with people of color. The immigrants are coming over the wall by the millions, although immigration is net zero, but you'll never convince them of that.
And what we're also not reminding them is not only is we keeping you poor, we're also keeping you uneducated.
Yeah.
That's the whole notion. That's how we keep you poor.
Right.
That's the ways and means to do that. That's the notion here. Again, public school was designed to educate the great unwashed, the poor, to give them an opportunity to rise above. That was the American dream, that no matter what class that you were born into, that you could always rise above that. And the vehicle was public education.
Right.
But we have people that don't want that to happen. I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe the former president's administration, the first 2 years, they had a majority of the House, Senate, and they had all three branches of the executive. Didn't do the first thing on immigration. Now they screaming and yelling. It's election time that they're coming over the wall again. Got to build the wall. I hear I can't turn the TV on because I hear those commercials.
Yep.
Now they had 2 years, clear field. Nothing to slow them down. Had the judiciary, had the House, the Senate, Supreme Court, and the president screaming, "I want to," not a peep on an immigration bill, not one peep, because they truly don't want an immigration bill because they want cheap labor.
That's it. They're the ones that benefit from it.
That's exactly right. They want cheap labor. It's all about money. Yes. But now we've got to rile our base up. But they're coming to they're not taking your job unless you're hanging sheetrock or
Yeah.
doing drywall or, painting or doing some really hard roofing. They're not taking your job. They ain't standing down and greeting and getting the buggies at Walmart.
That's right.
They ain't taking your job. They're doing real labor.
Right.
But that again, we had two. I didn't hear a peep about immigration for 2 years. Not one peep. Could done whatever they wanted about immigration. Nope. Nope. Didn't do that. Didn't want to. Now I can't turn on the TV without hearing it again.
Yeah.
Again, what we say and what we do. Now, the only thing that the only truth in this whole thing is when I see those guys standing in the well, the North Carolina legislator, and saying, "You can't make us." That's as close to telling the truth, to saying the quiet part out loud, as I've seen in a long time. Why not? You just can't make us. We don't want to. We don't have to tell you why. We don't have to give you a reason why. We just don't want to. We don't have to justify this. You can't make us.
That's what my mom used to say, because I said so.
That's exactly right. And that's where we are.
That's where we are.
All right. And so again, Judge Lee said you owe over $1 billion. And of course they made him retire, and the new judge is still, but they'll keep on shopping judges. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
They'll keep on shopping judges until they find one that says, well, you don't owe them.
Yeah.
And that's what we discussed as a group last night, how
they'll get a Trump appointee before long, and they'll say you don't owe them.
He was there the whole time, every case he was presiding over. Then all of a sudden, Republicans come into power, and then all of a sudden he retires.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I mean. And so we're probably insulting somebody, but
probably.
These are facts, folks. These are not opinions. These are verifiable, objective truth in terms of what's going on with the funding. And it breaks your heart. You can go online and you can see some of these Leandro videos. You can see the Senate with them, the legislature in North Carolina with them talking and refusing to give the money. It will break your heart.
Let me ask you this question. We didn't put it in there because it just seemed like it was over, because one part of it we read said that if the court felt like they were not, the students were not getting fair and equitable education, that the courts could rule in the favor of.
They did. Well, but again, the General Assembly says you can't make us 90-90 boo-boo.
So they're just saying no.
They're just saying no. They're just standing up and saying no. They're not sending it back to committee or stalling or whatever like they did for the first 20 years. They're just coming out and saying now we're not going to.
That's what we kept looking. We kept reading like, okay, why? Where does it say why? We couldn't find it because it's not there. They're just saying no.
They're just saying no. We don't have to give you a reason why. We're the people who has the money. You can't make us.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's really ugly. I mean, you see them and how smug they are about it.
Wow.
That we don't have to justify this. We're playing to our base.
Wow.
We're drumming up votes out in these little small rural counties where people don't know any better.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're just brutal about it now. It's really hard to watch. Really hard to watch. All right.
All right. Next slide, Mr. Reeves.
We got that. Let's see. No, it's not appropriate. That's good.
Oh, yeah, this slide was a summary of the of the letter to the members.
No, you're right. It's not appropriate. We move on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here's the good stuff.
So these are our pros.
Yeah.
And based on the ethical paradigm of justice and care, I was thinking that it was as far as the pros, I understand that the superintendent, his intentions were good. His heart was in the right place to try to get equability for all students. And having the exceptional needs receive more funding and all these different things. But it just boiled down to the cons of it. And that is that it's just
illegal. Everything's right about it other than it's not legal.
It's not legal. And I mean, the way that it's looked at as far as the money is being disproportionate, as far as the flat fee, you know, that they give out. And if we start doing it with the SBB, right, then it will make it where some people are getting more, some people are getting less. If that's still equitable, you know, that's up for debate, right?
Well,
But
see, that's the notion here is emerging leaders going forward. You folks need to know the pros and the cons. You need to be able to sell this. I mean, it won't always be this way, hopefully. And you need to, you know, be the next generation that says we have to fix this funding issue where, you know, the same is not equitable. Now,
have you ever
again,
seen that thing? I mean, it's a little cartoon thing where like they put the kids and they're trying to show equitable, like some kids are shorter, some kids are taller. So
again,
even if you give
equity
them
versus against equal. That's
right,
what they're trying to do. They've got boxes and they're standing looking over the fence.
right,
And so that's the notion here. And that's and part of this is yes, if you do site-based or student-based funding, the money will be it won't be disproportional. It won't be the same.
right.
So we shouldn't use that term disproportionate. We should
Okay, yeah.
use it. The funding will not be equal,
But
but it will be what everybody needs.
right,
That's the thing about it. That term disproportionate is a pejorative term that makes it sound bad, like somebody's not getting what they need.
right.
And so you need to be able to talk about these, but your talking points going forward as you become leaders in this business, your talking points shouldn't be terms like equal and disproportionate. They should be about equity, getting people what they need and getting people to understand that that's not a bad thing. And looking at the legal underpinning of public schools, which is provided, it was for, the masses to help them achieve the American dream, which was rise above their station in life where they were born. That was the whole notion, is the whole notion of public education. We've morphed that into, we want private school, basically vouchers for, where kids can go to private school, or we've morphed it into charter schools where some of them are really good, but some of them are about making money for the people that run them. Now, Lincoln Charter School, one of my favorites. Langtree, I've got several. I mean, good ones are good, but bad ones are bad, just like public schools. But we've morphed our public education into something that's not even recognizable, not what the founding fathers had in mind. It's become a spoil system to reward our friends and punish our enemies. Reward our friends with vouchers or charters to open schools and make money, or punish our enemies, the people of color, and keep them having less all the time. And the poor white people along with them, unfortunately. They're kind of in the same boat.
Right.
All
So
right.
we were just saying, overall, it's just not legal for the
No,
superintendent.
it's not legal. It might be the right thing to do. It's not legal, but at some point it could become legal if another court. But and the only way for it to become legal is you folks have to know the arguments and be able to dispel all these notions, these people. And again, you don't, you got to know the right terminology to use and the rationale behind that. Going forward, I want y'all to know this is how it is. You can't move money around, but if you could get the law changed, that would be a good thing. But right now, your job is to follow the law as a school administrator. If you don't, they'll crucify you. You'll lose your house. All right, next
So that's
slide.
the reason why in the last slide we quoted Duke's law. It should be in that
that's exactly right. That's that Duke Law Center gave the results. That's what goes in that middle between the finding, everybody gets a basic ed and West Ed. That's what part.
Right.
The plaintiffs lost the case. Unanimous court said that school districts nor counties have any constitutional right to equal funding in the end.
Right.
That they would
They have
not
equal
change,
education, but not equal funding.
Exactly. That we will not change the flat grant formula. That we're going to give you enough to get a basic education, but that's all you're owed. That's their interpretation of the law. As long as you get a sound basic education, and we're going to give you enough money to do that. It shouldn't take any extra local money to do that. Of course, we know it does, but that was what they said. And so we got to understand, in the end, you can stop your share. In the end, the Leandro plaintiffs lost the case. We're not changing the formula, but we're going to say we'll give you money. I don't know how we thought we'd get money without changing the formula, how it would change, how it would differentiate the money. I mean, the formula is how we differentiate how we dole the money out. They said, oh, well, we won't change that, but we'll give you a lottery. No lottery, state lottery anywhere has ever put a dime. Hired one teacher. It can't. It's only for capital. It has hired not one teacher. It's built a few worthless buildings, but not many of them, because only 7 cents on the dollar ever come to education, and most of that gets stolen.
That's wild.
Siphoned off into stuff that doesn't matter. But it was never intended to do. It doesn't buy books, resources, materials. Doesn't pay for teachers. Can't. It's set up to be capital only. So, because that's pork barrel for politicians to give to their friends, to build buildings that aren't needed or things of that nature. So the lottery has not added $1 to the cost of educating a child. It was
because
only
it can't.
capital.
Because you're saying it can't because of where the money has to go.
Right. The lottery was set up to only help with capital funding. Remember, the district said, we're poor. We can't put money into educating kids because we're spending it on capital. Because y'all, a bunch of bigots, got out of capital funding in 1966 and left it up to us because they didn't want to integrate schools. And so the state gives you no money to build or maintain your schools. That's capital. Schools, the buildings, the physical building. So they said, we're going to give you poor people more money. Well, how? We're not going to change the formula. We're going to give you the lottery, but it can only be for capital. But that capital that doesn't help educate a child. And it only went to their cronies, and they built stuff that's already even been abandoned. I told you, they built a cafeteria to high school. 2 years later, they closed because it didn't have 300 kids. It was, and majority of that money they spent on it was just completely stolen. Cost about 3 times what a small cafeteria ought to cost. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Not one penny of the lottery has gone to help educate a child.
So how is that money split? Like, did everybody get a flat rate in that regard, or was it based on allotments? Or like, how did they determine how much capital funding? Was there like a request to the state and then the state had to approve?
You're talking about for the lottery money? It's pork barrel. Pork barrel means the guy comes in the legislature and says, I want to give money to my friends over here. And they all vote yay or nay. There is no system. There is no allotment. There's no formula. It's complete pork barrel. Look up what pork barrel means. It just means that I'm able to give it to my friends if I want to. No system, no rhyme or reason.
No regards with that either. That makes sense.
I mean, that's.
So it's like if they say we're going to build a building, but they're really building that building so that their friends that have this construction
contract
can get the contract. Right.
And so that $2 million building costs $8 or $10 million.
Right.
They've only really spent $1 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly corrupt system. Pork barrel is incredibly corrupt system, but the lottery money for capital is completely pork barrel. Completely. No formula whatsoever. No system of how to request it or get it. No process other than a legislator and they can get enough people to vote. We're gonna give him. We're gonna give Brandon the money. He's going to build a new outhouse on the backside of the high school over there in Guilford County. That outhouse costs $7 million. Sounds reasonable to us. Now, but we want our friend over here to have the contract to build that. I mean, building in capital is where the most theft and graft and corruption goes on in America. Building capital, that. And so the lottery was not designed to add money to help schools educate kids. It was only for capital, and only 7% of the money and it gets wasted. It gets lost. They said they were going to give enough money to help kids, and they're over $1 billion behind, and no chance of catching up. But that's where we are, folks. That's where we are. And we can't afford. Now, one of the things I like about South Carolina is willing to pay teachers more, to try to keep teachers understanding that that's more important than facilities. North Carolina tends to get all bent out of shape and caught up on having the nicest, newest, best facility, the latest, this, that, and the other. South Carolina does not. They're spending their money on teachers, because guess who educates kids? Teachers, not buildings.
Not buildings.
There you go. There you go. The best school I ever saw was in the worst shape of any building I've ever seen. Let me say that again. The best school I ever saw was in the worst shape of any building I've ever seen. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. But it didn't have
This
a thing
case made me
educating the kids.
This case made me think about our previous superintendent. He was the first African American to have that position, and he stood up at the first meeting and said, "Let's talk about critical race theory." And
he was the last black superintendent too, wasn't he?
And the entire district was like, all the black people was like, "Oh,
he didn't say that. Oh no, he didn't."
And then behind closed doors, he started pushing the agenda of giving more equitable-based funding on the state level.
Yeah.
He didn't make it a year.
Oh no.
And before he was out, and they sent him to, ended up going to Philly, be superintendent there. And then they rolled in a lady who's been a principal here, start off as a teacher and a principal, and she knows somebody, and her father-in-law was on the school board.
Sure. Yeah, we had to, Yeah. I get it. Well, that's the state of things. But what I like about what Larry just told you is people will persecute you over this stuff if they find out, because their tribalism, their political truth. Boy, they'll come after you tooth and nail. It doesn't matter that you're trying to do the right thing for kids. That's not important at all. Not important at all in this. But yeah, we're caught in this South Carolina. Some of the just my heart bleeds for some of the kids, the spaces that they have to go to school in. But they pay their teachers more, and they're trying to, they understand their money needs to go to try to educate kids, not to buildings. North Carolina is still in the, we got to build a new building, because our friends get all the contracts and steal most of it, but we got to build more buildings.
Unless you're alternative school.
Yeah, well, alternative schools are, they're a necessary evil. The only place that I know that built a new alternative school was in Brunswick County, in Charlotte. They built one down there. That's the only one that I know. Everybody else is in some, just like when I set the one up in Burke County when I was assistant superintendent there. We cleaned out the old storage area in the old Morganton Junior High downtown and made it there. I mean, that's what you do, because nobody gives you money. And I wanted the money to be spent on teachers and on the kids there. And if we'd spent it on the facility, we'd have had to come up with the money. Again, who has to pay for facilities? The local. And it would have taken the money away that we were spent on the kids. And so that's why you do that. All right. I told you it doesn't take as long when we get the second one, but if I've insulted you tonight, that was my intention. No, I apologize. But if your party is on the wrong side of this, you need to think about that. I mean, I've not told anything that's not objective truth here tonight about. You should watch some of those General Assembly sessions on the Leandro case with Judge Lee, and it's hard. I'll tell you, it'll hurt your heart. It'll hurt your heart. But in the end, Don't be moving money around when you're not supposed to, as a principal or a superintendent, because there's a lot of politics behind that. And you always heard, your money or your honey. You lose your job as a principal if you're messing with the money or diddling the help, having sexual relationships with them. The money is more than anything else, because it's the politics behind the money. It's not the dollar figures themselves. It's what they represent. The tribalism, the political partisanship behind the dollars. That's what budgets represent. And that's why people get so bent out of shape about them. It's not just the dollars. It's bigger than the dollars. It's the tribalism, the political truth that goes behind those, and the tribalism that goes with it. So that's why it's so important. People say all the time, it wasn't that much money. It ain't the money, folks. It's you're goring the wrong ox. You're on the wrong side of the political debate. You've riled up the base. So yeah, rarely is it the money itself. It's not going to be huge amounts. It's that you've done something against my group. You've offended my group. You've supported the other group, and you know how we are now. What is it? 30% of Americans say it's okay to kill the people in the other party, or some ridiculous number like that. That's what we're talking about. That's why it becomes such a big deal about moving dollars. It ain't the dollars themselves, it's what they represent. Y'all are doing a great job. I love reading your work. I will see you again next week. We'll talk about the next case. Everybody have a good week. Thank you. Thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. 3 excellent jobs tonight.